Hello guys and welcome back to the Tank Club. Today we're going to be having a quick look at Alkosh and the Crimson Oath set. We're going to kind of compare the two. We're going to look at the buffs to Alkosh. We're going to look at the new set Crimson Oath, and then we're going to kind of see where you might use each set, if at all. So let's have a quick look. So we've got Alkosh, which has been changed again this patch. It's been changed now, I think, every patch for over a year. So it's had quite a few updates. We're back again with another change, and it's been changed in quite a big way this time. So if we take a little look, we'll skip past the damage part. So obviously it's still the same when it comes to the damage. The main thing here is reduces the physical and spell resistance of any enemy hit by the amount of your weapon damage for the duration, up to a maximum of 6,000. The damage scales off the higher of your weapon and spell damage. So to get the most out of Alkosh now, we need to have essentially 6,000 weapon damage. So it's a huge buff, essentially. The armor shred of 6,000, 6k pen, massive. The big question we've got really is Alkosh needed? When is it needed? The answer really is never. I guess it kind of depends. The Alkosh armor shred scaling on your weapon damage means they've kind of finally made it into a set that's not really useful for tanks. When you kind of consider that the Crimson set, which we'll go over in a minute, seems like a much better set, especially for a tank. The main thing that's kind of killed Alkosh off for a tank is the fact that Crimson is a thing. More so than the way that they've adjusted Alkosh. So the way they've adjusted Alkosh doesn't make it unusable for tanks. The Crimson set is just superior in terms of a tank's use of the set. So if we kind of look at, in a fully buffed situation, if we look at our weapon damage, 3,183, 3,328, we're looking at around 3,500 weapon damage as a tank when we're buffed up in a raid. Now we could get that higher, but we're going to be kind of way off that 6k max pen. So you could build towards the higher value, but what is the point? Because you're going to have to give up a lot of stuff. You're going to have to sacrifice a lot to reach 6k weapon damage on a tank. And the fact of the matter is, it's not really worth it. So in a Magicka group on the live server right now, there is no real need for Alkosh on almost any fights in the game. The only time it's really useful is on ad pulls. The reason for this is because you cannot get a Crusher enchant to proc on more than one enemy. When you proc your Crusher enchant, it will only hit one enemy. It can't proc on multiple targets. So that's why Alkosh is used. When you've got 6 to 8 enemies, your Crusher will only go on one of them, which means the other ads are quite a lot under the pen cap. So for that situation, we've kind of continued to use Alkosh, even in Magicka groups, to make sure that we're always at max pen and we can kill the ads faster. In terms of dungeons, you don't really need Alkosh. Unless you were kind of using Dressing Room and you switch between the ad phases and the bosses, you could kind of use Alkosh in a similar way, just on ad phases. Trial situations outside of ad pulls, you sometimes will see it used on boss fights where the ad phases are actually more important than the boss fight. So, Locustes and Navintas in Sunspire are both great examples. You don't need Alkosh for the boss on Navintas. But the ad phase is actually far more important because it's a very dangerous ad pull. And it can be difficult if you don't kill the ads fast enough, if your group don't have enough damage, if the ads are running loose onto the group, things like that. You need to kill the ads faster, so Alkosh helps you to do that. When we look at stamina groups, Alkosh could be used to reach the pen cap without the need for things like the piercing CP or crystal weapon. So potentially Alkosh is good in that environment. And we're talking kind of next patch now. You would be quite a lot over the pen cap with a maxed out Alkosh. But you would kind of most likely need to put it on a damage dealer, and they would need to be the one using it. Now, you could potentially combine Alkosh on a DD with Crimson on a tank in a stamina group, which would mean you could afford to drop something like Tremor Scale, which is a bit, like, more often than not, it's a bit of a pain to maintain when you've got to proc it with a taunt every 8 seconds. So for the sake of like the ease of getting to the pen cap in a stamina group, you might consider using Alkosh on a DD with Crimson on a tank and then drop Tremor Scale. You also wouldn't need as many things, like I said, the crystal weapon wouldn't be needed. You wouldn't need to max out your piercing CP. There'd be loads of different things that you could avoid doing with stamina groups to reach that pen cap a lot easier. Now, the downside of Alkosh overall is the fact it's limited to a 10 to 12 meter cone. If we kind of look at this, you can see the kind of smoke that comes out from Alkosh. So when we get a synergy, that is the area of which we're going to be able to get Alkosh. So it's in that kind of conal AoE in front of you. It doesn't go behind you or to the sides. It's a cone. It's got a very short distance in reality compared to some other sets. So, I mean, and it depends on the size of the hitbox as well. Like, it can hit a bit further depending on how big the hitbox is of the enemy. But generally, I mean, it's always been fine for most things. But it's quite limiting in the fact that if you're trying to hit a lot of things, there's a chance that you're going to miss them. And then you're going to be on the cooldown. You've got to have more synergies coming in to be able to proc it. So that's the big downside. And the fact you also need to farm more of Lorcash to obtain the Alkosh set. And that can be difficult for some people. And I've known people not have the pieces they need of Alkosh after months of farming it. So that is an issue itself. So the Crimson set. We've already looked at this a couple of days ago. But the main thing, if we actually look at the set, it's a tanky set. It's a tank-based set. It's heavy armor, not medium armor. It's got tank-based set-piece bonuses, armor, max health, armor. And then when we look at this, so the 5-piece bonus, when you use an ability that applies a major or minor buff to yourself or an ally, send out a wave of energy that reduces the armor of nearby enemies within 12 meters by 3,541 for 15 seconds. This effect can occur every 12 seconds. It'll only happen when you're near an enemy. So, Crimson, could it replace Alkosh? Well, the answer is yes, because it's actually a tank set. It's heavy armor. It has tank set piece bonuses. It offers more pen than Alkosh does on the current live server right now. The major benefit of Crimson Oath is the range, and because you've kind of got full control over the set. So if you look now, so we've got some enemies around the room. So we've got skeleton there, and there. We just need to do a major buff. It's hit absolutely everything, as you can see there. Look how massive of an area this covers. So, the area that Crimson can proc within and debuff enemies is absolutely huge. It's amazing. There's basically no way you will use Alkosh from a tank perspective when you can use this and hit targets over this absolutely ginormous area. So when ad pulls, it can be kind of easy to miss certain targets with Alkosh. Like, everything needs to be stacked really tight, everything needs to be in front of you. If you look at the enormous area that Crimson covers, like, this is the size of most areas in a trial. There's not many areas that are much wider and bigger than this. So, you're going to hit everything every time. The only time, obviously, you could miss is if, like, let's say you're running into an ad pull. So if you're running into an ad pull and you accidentally use it there, you've then got to wait 12 seconds before you can use it again inside the middle of the ad pull. So that's the only thing. You've got to kind of be careful that if you are pre-buffing going into an ad pull, you need to make sure, like, if you're pre-buffing with you're pre-buffing your balance or whatever you pre-buff before you get anywhere near an enemy. Because if you get too close to the enemy and then you accidentally pre-buff it, obviously then when all the enemies are stacked and in range, you're not going to be able to use it. So you do have to be a little bit careful. You've got to pre-buff before you're anywhere near any enemies. When you get in, and then make sure when you get into the middle of the enemies, that's when you start to think about proccing it on everything. So, if we also look at how to control Crimson, and this is another major benefit compared to Alkosh. So Alkosh has always, as far as like the entire time it's existed, has always been typically annoying in some way, because you could have a really bad uptime of Alkosh just because your group don't provide enough synergies, or they don't place them in the correct location where you can actually reach them and use them, or even group members use the synergies so you're not able to use them yourself. And so your Alkosh uptime is heavily reliant on your group. And that is even without considering the fact that the tank using Alkosh has also got to time the use of the synergies and make sure that there's like an available synergy at the time that it's nearly expiring and about to nearly run out. And then the synergy might disappear if you don't know how long it's been there. So someone might place a synergy on the ground, and as you're about to use it, it disappears, or somebody else uses it, and then it's gone. Now the control you've got with Crimson is it procs off a major buff. If we look at just the bar that I'm using right now, Major buff. Igneous Shield has got a major buff, major mending, so it's going to proc from that. Green Dragon Blood, major fortitude, major endurance. It's going to proc from that. Look at the back bar. What else have we got? We've got balance. It's going to proc off that, major resolve. It's going to proc off your potions, which gives major fortitude, major intellect, major endurance. So it procs off things that you'll be doing naturally. And you can overlap the uptime of the armor shred easily to maintain the 100% pen on the enemies. It's doing all, like to proc Crimson Oath, you're doing basic things, simple things that you do all the time. You're going to usually do it anyway. You're always going to be using Igneous Shield, balance. You're going to heal yourself. You're going to be drinking potions. You're going to be doing all of those things. So it's something you don't have to think about, really. In a way, it's going to proc quite easily. And especially if you're using it in ad pulls, you obviously go into an ad pull, you cast Igneous Shield on a DK, for example. Other classes have got other skills that will also proc it. Anything that says major on it will proc it. So it's very, very easy to go in and use it at any point in time. So basically, is Crimson worth using? Absolutely. In the same situation, we use Alkosh right now. So things like ad pulls, it will be essential in those Magicka groups. You're going to be using this set instead of Alkosh, 100%. In stamina groups, it will really depend on if you have somebody using Alkosh. If your group intend on using Tremor Scale, overall I would say you would want to have Crimson Oath ready and available in a stamina group, but you may not require it depending on your group's individual requirements. So I can tell you different setups about different ways to set things up and how to do different things, but every group's going to have a different way that they look at it. For like, you can set up trials in many different ways that all work in a similar way. Your group raid leader needs to kind of consider how your group works, the experience of the group, and what's going to be most beneficial. In a stamina group, is Alkosh going to be a realistic thing to use? Is everything stacked nicely? Is everything stacked in a way that somebody can proc Alkosh in front of them and they can get enough synergies to do so? If not, obviously Crimson Oath is going to be better with Tremor Scale. If somebody's using Alkosh and Crimson, you might not need Tremor Scale, and you might not need other things like I said earlier, Crystal Weapon, and there's loads of different ways that you can use this and consider this, and it's really got to be thought about within each individual group. So to sum everything up, Crimson Oath is definitely a direct Alkosh replacement for tanks. It's a great set, covers a huge area that is 100% under your control, and it will be essential for ad pulls in Magicka groups and stamina groups, I guess. It's easy to farm because it comes from a dungeon rather than a trial, so you only need 3 other people instead of 11 to be able to grab hold of this set. You'll combine it in a similar way in ad pulls to the way that we do now. Things like Defiled Dragon, Frozen Watcher, War Machine, Yolnahkrin, Powerful Assault. You combine it with one of those sets, depending on what the other person is using in ad pulls for trials especially. For ad pulls, my typical way to reach the max pen is by stacking all the ads using Rage Taunt, using chains, line of sight, whatever we need to do to get everything into a stack. And then if we look at kind of thinking about next patch, placing a Razor Caltrops for that AoE major breach, using Defiled Dragon for the AoE minor breach, proccing Crimson Oath for the AoE pen. And if we look at kind of Magicka damage dealers using 6 or 7 light armor, we're at the pen cap. So major breach 5648, minor breach 2974, but then we've got Crimson Oath at 3541. If you're using kind of the 6 light armor passives gives you 5634. That puts us at 18,097. Now if you're a Necro, that would be 1,500 more pen. If you're a Nightblade flanking, that's another 2,974. The pen cap is 18,200. So we're there. If there are people who are in 7 light, then we're at 19,036 pen without even considering the piercing CP, which is another 700 pen. That's without considering Necro and Nightblade passives as well. So essential for ad pulls. It's going to be fantastic, guys. So this is an absolute must-have set. Crimson Oath must-have set. Definitely replacing Alkosh when we're looking at the tank perspective. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you've got any questions, let me know in the comments below. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye for now.